So let's talk about inflation for a little while tonight. I really thought the video that I had done earlier today was pretty good, but I got a lot of people who are like, bro, what the hell are you talking about? What do you mean inflation returning? Inflation's never left. And I got to thinking about it. It was just like, yeah, I probably should have talked about disinflation and stagflation and, all the other types of inflation that are out there. But ultimately, inflation is not increasing, it's decreasing, which is really technically disinflation, right? But it doesn't really matter. It's the whole inflation expectation that is really what I guess is probably the key to focus in on, because inflation expectation is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And now some of the things that I look at being in the retail business myself, I sell building supplies for a living, is I get to see firsthand prices on all the products, like my cost all the way to what we retail them for. Sometimes we retail certain products for a ridiculous amount of money. Like the markup on plumbing fittings is like, I couldn't even tell you how much it is. It's just a stupid amount, right? But other items like lumber hardly has any markup at all. And this is where, if you look at a lot of the products that you had purchased in the past, you're going to find that the price of those things haven't come down. But if you look for alternative products, maybe new products that have come in from, maybe brand names you've never seen before, or in the case of like what I seen happen with fiber cement siding, is they changed the name, somewhat of the look, and the warranty of it, but changed nothing else about the product whatsoever, but it comes in at a cheaper price, right? This is disinflationary things that are happening. It's not exactly like prices are falling back to where they were, but they're not increasing. Increasing is the inflation, right? Or the inflation expectation. And I shouldn't say they're not increasing. They're not increasing like the pace that we once had seen. I mean, there was some products I never even saw move at all, like 15-pound felt. I sell for $35 a roll. I think I've been selling it for $35 a roll for like, I don't know, 8 years. It's been for a while. Hey, kid. So when it comes to inflation expectation being the real issue, right? Because you can talk about all the shortages and you can talk about the supply chain breakdowns and you can talk about all that other stuff. But if you have inflation expectation that is persistent, then that will be a self-fulfilling prophecy. People will behave in such a way that the inflation will continue, right? Now, this is why I'm so adamant about this speech. Like, this speech is so telling about what it is that the Federal Reserve's problems were and how it was that they needed inflation expectation to increase. Right? Listen to this. Today we face an altogether different set of problems stemming from a very low neutral interest rate. That is, short-term real interest rates consistent with an economy that is operating at its potential alongside low and stable inflation. Ironically, the problem we need to solve these days is the risk of inflation that is persistently too low rather than too high. So the Federal Reserve was sitting in a position in which that the neutral interest rates were too low and that their monetary policy was becoming ineffective. They were going to fail, right? They were going to fail unless they had a digital currency or go negative interest rates or whatever, right? But that was essentially the problem, is that they no longer had an effective monetary policy, or at least a tool for effective monetary policy, because they couldn't lower interest rates beyond the lower bound of zero, right? Let me read a little bit more from this. This downward shift, okay, oh, I'm sorry. Okay. The downward shift in inflation expectation has a second round effect on real interest rates, the economy, and inflation. When policy is constrained by the effective lower bound, the downward shift in inflation expectation raises the real interest rates, further diminishing the degree of monetary stimulus, making the downturn worse and reducing inflation even more. So I'm going to read that again. But think about this. The downward shift in inflation expectation has this diminishing effect on the degree of monetary stimulus. Let me read it again. The downward shift in inflation expectation has a second round effect on real interest rates, the economy, and inflation. When policy is constrained by the effective lower bound, the downward shift in inflation expectation raises the real interest rates, further diminishing the degree of monetary stimulus, making the downturn worse and reducing inflation even more. So now I think about that. That downward shift in inflation expectation raises the real interest rates. Now that is something that is like, I had thought about that a lot when I first read that. I mean, I read this speech, years ago. It came out in November of 2018, right? I just want to make sure I got that right. November 30th, 2018. Monetary policy for a low neutral interest rate world. But when I first read that, I was like, what is this if you lower inflation expectation, you can raise the real interest rates, right? And now it took me a while to figure that out, but after Googling and doing research or whatever. Okay, so if you're an investor who is anticipating on getting a 2% return, right? You're going to get a 2% return on whatever it is, and we're just doing this hypothetical, no investor would ever do this, right? So investor's going to get a 2% return. The inflation expectation is 1%. The real interest rate that the investor is going to get will be 1%. What they intend on getting after inflation, right? So if the inflation expectation is 1%, the investor is planning on getting 2% and getting the 1% return after inflation, and you lower the inflation expectation, you will raise the real interest rate to 2%, what the investor is planning on getting. Now, this concept works throughout the entire economy, right? If you can lower the inflation expectation, you will raise the real interest rates on the entire economy, right? And not just for the investor, but for the entire thing, right? Now, let me see, what else I want to add to that? I want to make sure I got that clear. So when you think about, when you think about when you think about inflation expectation and how often that they mess with the inflation scenario, like how often do they really talk about inflation, right? It was become a hot topic deal just lately and just before the pandemic kicked in, right? Now, the Federal Reserve was raising interest rates. They got their Fed funds up to 2.5% or so, and it really started pissing off the markets. Now, this is something to really think about here because the Federal Reserve was trying to raise the real interest rates. They were trying to raise rates up. They had a low neutral interest rate in an economy that didn't have a monetary policy that was effective, right? Because if they didn't have the Fed funds rate up to around 5% and they only had it at 2.5%, that is not enough to stimulate the economy in order to lower it. But is it enough to even impact or slow the economy down? It absolutely was, because the economy was getting pissed off about it. The markets were. So how do you continue to raise the real interest rates but not actually mess with the Fed funds rate? You get the president to go out there and scream, there's no inflation! The Fed should be printing money, right? And so this is raising the real interest rate. So even if the Federal Reserve stopped, right, increasing their rates, the president, Donald Trump, was able to continue on raising the real interest rates from that point on by just getting the inflation expectation to go down by screaming about how much he was wanting to fire Jerome Powell, right? If you can lower the inflation expectation, you can raise the real interest rates. Now think about that. That also had a diminishing effect on the stimulus. So again, right? The downward shift in inflation expectation has a second round effect on real interest rates, the economy, and inflation. When the policy is constrained by the effective lower bound, right? When you can't move it down any further, the downward shift in inflation expectation raises the real interest rates, further diminishing the degree of monetary stimulus. And you think about it, this happened just before COVID kicked in. It was pushing down the degree of monetary stimulus just as we were rolling into recession. Is this okay, maybe it was an accident. I don't know. All right. So let me see. There's one more part in here I wanted to read to you guys. All right. The problem, right? This is literally what they say. The problem of anchoring inflation expectation at the target rate while maintaining a low inflation target rate amid low neutral interest rates. Or low neutral rate. That is probably one of the most confusing things to ever listen to this guy ever write, right? Okay, the problem of anchoring inflation expectation at the target rate, right? So you want to anchor the inflation expectation at 2%, right? Let's just use the number. They don't use numbers here, but we're just saying it, right? So they want to anchor the inflation expectation at 2% while maintaining a low inflation target rate. Okay, so not only do you have an expectation that is low, but then you have a low target rate and you have a low neutral interest rate, right? Because this is the problem that comes from it, is that if you have the Fed funds rate, where I guess I should explain that the Fed funds rate and the neutral interest rate is when the Fed funds rate is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. And now if that neutral interest rate is too low, then you don't have any room to stimulate the economy from the expectation of 2% if you already have the Fed funds rate at 2%. You see what's happened here? Now all of a sudden now they have no way of stimulating the economy. All right, so when I think about what it is that the Federal Reserve truly needed and what they have right now, right? They have an inflation expectation scenario that is running rampant, right? There is like, I mean, I look at the video and I look at some of the comments down there and people would think that I was high on crack, by some of the things that they were saying. But yet it was exactly the scenario that the Federal Reserve needed in order to continue on with their monetary policy, and we're giving it right to them by having a high inflation expectation, right? I mean, that's essentially what has taken place here. The Federal Reserve gets continue to raise their interest rates, their Fed funds rate, getting all their ammo back, and it's raising the neutral interest rate. Everything that they were claiming to be a problem is being solved right now with a high inflation expectation. That's exactly what is happening here. Now, again, these are the stories that we all tell ourselves. You can look out there and call it a political problem, and you can call it whatever you want to see it, but I'm looking at this speech from 2018 talking about what their major problems were that they were facing as far as their monetary policy and being able to conduct it, and considering that the situation that we are now in today, these guys are getting everything that they ever wanted. It's like a dream come true to them. And every time we sit there and we scream about how bad the inflation is from all the money printing, they're just rolling in laughter thinking, man, look at this, it's just totally working. Every bit of it is. And I don't mean to sound so like, I mean, I'm not sorry to say anything, but, I don't like, this is the way I see it, right? This isn't like, something I'm trying to make up or trying to sound, cool about, or, just trying to be, some kind of devil's advocate. This is like coming straight out of the Federal Reserve and hidden within their own speech. I mean, think about the way they talk about some of this stuff. I mean, the problem with anchoring inflation expectation at the target rate while maintaining a low inflation target rate while low neutral interest rate, although the price level targeting is a bigger leap from inflation targeting than average inflation targeting. I mean, this stuff is like almost impossible to understand. It's just like you sit there and read it and it makes your mind spin. But if you read the speech 400 times and you really take it to heart on some of these things that they are saying, then you can really kind of get a good grasp of what it is that's being said there. I guess I should read some of the things that you guys are talking about. All right, let me go back up to the top. Hey, what's going on? Happy Taco Tuesday, everyone. What up, all-nighter? What's the number one indicator for predictions of deflation? The number one predictor is the unwinding of the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. You think about it, what is inflation? What's deflation? Inflation is the expansion of money and credit. Deflation would be the opposite of that. Prices are the results. So prices aren't really inflation. That's what we end up seeing as a result of inflation. But inflation is really the expansion of money and credit. And when you have a deflationary scenario, that means that the expansion of money and credit is actually contracting. What we're experiencing today. So we are really technically in deflation. We're just not seeing it in the prices like everybody wants to see it. Okay. All right. Hey, guys. Hey, dishes. Love you, baby. All right. Got in early. Well, good to see you, Big Hill. All right. UE, thanks for your lumber update. Always learn lots from your videos. Well, thank you very much. And I hope you learn, something from everywhere you go, from everything that you do. I mean, everything that in life is a learning experience. It's a lot of times, when you're listening to somebody who's sitting there talking completely unlike anybody else. I mean, is there anybody else who's talking like this on the internet? I mean, really saying like by having a high inflation expectation, you're actually doing the Fed a favor. I mean, I'm the only one who was just like, nope, I'm going to continue to blame this on a supply chain breakdown because that's the way I saw it. And not only that, but I also don't have to fall into the inflation expectation like the Federal Reserve was hoping for. And so in my way, I feel like I'm truly fighting the Fed, by not falling for their inflation expectation scenario that they needed. All right, good evening, all-nighter. How's it going, all-nighter? What's up, Simon? Been watching you since you had 20,000 K subs. Wow, man, from the early days. Yeah, it's been a while since that was like around let's see, 20,000. I'm guessing that was probably right around 2020. So it's been 3 years, 3 or 4 years now. Um, Because I remember I hit 10,000 and I just was blown away. And then after 10,000, it just really shot up like a rocket. And, that's when I really started getting a lot of attention here. All right. Let's see here. I can't get, well, lots of shrinkflation. Yeah, I mean, well, like just for example, today I'm talking with one of the vendors at work, right? So a lot of you know that I do retail sales at a lumber yard, and so we have vendors who come in constantly. And I said to him, I said, okay, man, what do you see for price increase? Do you see anything happening out there that I have to know about so I can warn my customers? And he was like, no. And I said, prices coming down? He says, yeah, and a lot of stuff. And I said, what are you seeing the most price reduction on? He said, right now MDF, right? So, and that's true. I see a lot of price reductions on MDF, on a lot of trim boards, cedar boards are coming down, all that kind of stuff. The things that you're not seeing it yet is like windows, doors, a little bit on doors, not much, but a little bit on doors, not on windows. But everything else seems to have some sort of price reduction or some sort of alternative product, or at least is not going up in price anymore. So like lumber's peaked out and coming down in many ways, especially when it comes to like framing lumber, 2x4s, 2x6s. Those are very, very cheap now. I mean, those are prices like we had back in 2018. All right, greetings from Washington. Nice and hot here. Probably hot in your area too. Yeah, but not nearly as much as it was yesterday. Holy moly, it was like 20 degrees hotter yesterday. All right, Fed going to keep raising rates. I mean, I would imagine that they can, right? I mean, they could keep raising rates, but really, ultimately, they need to do is just put out a bunch of mainstream media news articles and some sort of evidence out there with a bunch of like emotional kind of like thought to it, and they can lower the inflation expectation and continue to raise the real interest rate. So if they wanted to continue to raise rates without actually having to mess with the Fed funds rate, they could just do a bunch of media propaganda to make it happen. Yeah. I mean, I would look for it. Like, look for all the stories that have this really emotional connection about inflation coming down or the inflation expectation easing after the Federal Reserve has finally like stopped raising rates, saying that we're not going to raise rates anymore. And then they can continue to raise the real interest rates by doing that. I mean, I don't know how they'll do it, but I'm just saying kind of keep an eye out for it, right? Yeah. All right. What's up, UE? Default rates on auto loans and homes about to increase exponentially. Well, we'll see. And I've been hearing that for a long time, right? I mean, I've been hearing it yeah, you could probably see it a lot in probably auto. Like, I can imagine now where people are like give up their like, fancy car that they paid way too much money for. But there's not a lot of places to go. Like, if you give up your place to live, you're like, where the hell do I go, So like, like I could give up one of my cars. But I don't have new cars. I have old cars. But you know what I'm saying? It's just like you can kind of give up your car, downgrade your car, start taking public transit, whatever you got to do. But once you give up your place to live, it gets really difficult out there. Where can I buy that shirt, bro? Merch drop. Yeah, you can get it at Teespring. You can find a link for it down in the description of the video. And I believe that there's links to it also on like the about page of the channel and places like that. But yeah, I really appreciate it. Yeah, if you want an uneducated, and it's cool on the back. It's the, you guys let me know. It has the dice. So yeah, pretty cool, right? Okay. Is that fancy way of saying less return on investment? I guess. Any silver price thoughts in the next year or two? I mean, I really don't look at silver as something that I'm gonna make money on. I don't even think about the price. I don't think about what it is I look at the premium maybe that I'm paying, but I don't think about how much I've paid for the silver or how much it's going to be worth. The only thing I think about when it comes to silver is how many ounces do I have. That's it. That's the only thing I care about. And the reason is because I have no intentions on making money off of silver, right? I'm not a silver investor, and I don't plan on ever like using my silver to buy Lambos or something like that. Now, there's a lot of people out there who can use silver to trade and make some money with. And if that's the case, then really, I mean, people are going to want to choke me, but and that's the case, you're going to want to use like an ETF or something like that because you have easy in and out of the stock, right? Of the ETF. But if you're looking for something that's going to protect you against the third party, like the banking issues, if you want something that is going to allow you to sleep at night and not have to worry about what direction the market is going to go or what's going to happen, silver is an insurance policy. And it's always been that way for me. Now, I've looked at it like an investment. I thought that one day I was going to make a bunch of money off of it. And I had an opportunity to do that too in 2011 when it ran up to $50 an ounce. I could have cleared out all my silver and made a bunch of money off of it, but I didn't. I held on to it until it went all the way down into the teens. And I've been accumulating ever since. And the days that I had run into trouble in which that could not afford to buy a car and I had no way of getting to work and I lived way out in the country, it was my silver that saved me, right? It's a total insurance policy, and I encourage everybody to try to accumulate as much as they can, right? Even if it's just an ounce a week, it's only, what, talking less than $30, right? Think about what you're blowing $30 on. People go out to lunch and eat a hamburger and fries and a beer and $30 gone, just like that. You could have had an ounce of silver. Just as simple, just as easy as that, right? Okay. Go hit the like button, guys. We got 148 of you with 56 likes. I don't know, maybe you don't like it anymore. I don't know, maybe you don't like my stuff. All right. Lots of people in my circle griping and having to start payments again on student loans. Well, I mean, oops, they should have been. I mean, I don't know what to say about that. I don't have student loans, right? I mean, I didn't go to college. I didn't get a degree. I didn't have the opportunities that people who have a degree have, right? I mean, I didn't get any of that stuff, right? So I had to go out and I had to work every single day, and I had to suffer the consequences of becoming a drunk and deep in debt and pay myself out of that. So, I mean, people with a degree at least have a shot. So, I don't know what to say. I mean, poor them. I mean, get to work. I don't know what to say. Let's all be honest. Sometimes it's difficult to predict the current economy. For example, who ever predicted fires in Maui? Well, that's not really, I mean, it's an economic event that takes place, but it's not, outcome that comes from it, but it wasn't necessarily like an economic event in which that, it was just like, hey, this is had to do with like banking issues or investment things or, whatever. That's like, natural disaster kind of stuff, which does have an economic impact to it. But you're right. I mean, as far as predicting stuff like that, I mean, you can't. You're not going to. That's like, that. I mean, I don't even sit around trying to dwell on stuff like that. It's like, filling yourself with negative energy or something. It's just like, it's not worth it. That was something else I kind of thought about. I don't even know if I should bring this up. I thought about a lot of the raising of your vibration kind of stuff, right? So you try to live in a life that is like, on a higher plane, so to speak, where you're not feeling like down or depressed or anything like that, but you feel on like, this more of a, higher feeling of like just high vibrations, right? Good times or whatever. And you sit there and you study 3, 4, 5 hours a day depressing news, right? And then try to not let it affect you. And then wonder, if it really is or not. That's kind of some stuff to really think about, like how much you are actually taking in and how you are interpreting and making this news mean to you. Like for me, I come to the understanding. God, it's going out right here. I came to the understanding that I use this information to, oops, move this thing a little closer. I use this information to come out and make videos and be entertaining and, to try and benefit, myself and my family and everything that's going on around me. So to me, it's not like a negative thing. Like nothing I read is ever negative. It's just, it's just news and I just try to interpret it for what it is. But then a lot of times I think about like how it is that I present this information and whether or not people on the other side are taking it in a fearful manner or if they're taking it in a neutral manner or if they, if they even like, think it's just ridiculous and don't care, I mean, I do think about that at times. It's just like, wow, I wonder if I'm actually out there spreading a vibe in which that I would not necessarily want to take in myself. And it's not from me like what am I trying to say? Like trying to present or being in that negative vibe, but just more of just, the information itself that I'm presenting is a negative vibe type of thing anyway. You know, kind of get where I'm at? Anyway, let's move on. And I just babbling. Must have been a hard, must have been a day at work. I don't know. All right, thumbs up must be broken. Oh man, that's scratch my ass. So what do you? Lord, it's damn shame what the world's gotten to for people like me and people like you. Sometimes, or something big is starting to happen with China, real estate crisis, and now America, real estate crisis, is starting to show signs of big trouble as well. The two big economies in the world. Yeah, and I mean, I've said it for a while now. The things that are happening in China will eventually find themselves, on their way around the entire world. And it's going to be a little different for everybody because not everybody's the same, not like China. But when you think about the liquidity crisis that is going to start hitting, it's going to hit us too. And that's where, like, I mean, a lot of people like still argue with me or don't want to take on the idea, whether it's a possible outcome or not, but just the simple fact that the Treasury had made statements and talked of a strategy of dealing with a liquidity issue within the bond market come the beginning of 2024. And now you look at all these economists who are talking about like issues hitting in 2024. And I mean, it's not like I wonder why now. It was just like, yeah, because there's going to be a liquidity issue. There's going to be like bond and debt defaults, all over the place, and the Treasury is going to make sure that no matter what part of the yield curve is facing any kind of liquidity issue, they're going to be there to step up and buy those bonds. Right? They're going to be like behaving as if they were doing quantitative easing, like as if the Federal Reserve was doing quantitative easing. It will be something very similar in such fashions, only it'll be coming from the Treasury, and it's the only purpose of it is to make sure that the bond market stays liquid. And it's only going to be, like I would imagine, it's only going to be for the primary dealers, right? Like it's not, I don't think they're worried about like the entire world bond market becoming illiquid. They're just worried about whether or not the big banks are going to be buying and selling those bonds so that the rest of the world would be confident within buying and selling those bonds. That's really what I see happening is something like that, incoming in 2024, where people are going to be looking at the dollar going, man, I can't believe how much in demand it is to try and get out of all these debts. So allegedly, many died in certain states because possibly there was not enough retirement funds and Social Security. I mean, yeah, I've heard that one. So, ADHDers smacking that heart button. Hey, Scratchy. Yeah. Adderall is one hell of a drug. Yeah, I'm not on Adderall. I drink too much coffee. Alright. Let's laugh. Hard pass, man. I am moving to a remote island to live the hermit life. That'd be fun. Damn, you must be hot as hell sitting in that greenhouse. It's not really a greenhouse. It's actually mostly covered. It's just a couple of panels that you see that it doesn't really get that warm in here. And then it's completely open on the back side over there, so it's not hot. It's actually kind of cool. Alright. Howdy, all-nighter, enjoying Taco Tuesday. If the economy went to hard currency like gold-backed dollars, the economy would have a huge contraction. A lot of BS jobs and BS consumption would disappear. Yeah, and a lot of the way of life and the standard of living that we enjoy would also go with it. I mean, you got to think about it. It's like most of the stuff that we really truly enjoy as far as luxuries in this world are coming from foreign nations. There are, American-made stuff that we do enjoy, but not nearly as much as like comes from foreign production. And the moment that we go to a hard currency or something like that, and unless we are producing that stuff for ourselves, we're going to have to buy it from somebody else. And unless we want to export all our gold to buy foreign production, then we're just going to have to just suffer without, which means that we're going to have to lower our standard of living. And until like that changes, I don't see any way. Now, again, like I the more I learn about the gold standard, if we were an industrious nation that could export more than we import, then I would be all over the gold standard. I would be, yes, absolutely, we should be on it. But when we import more than we export, absolutely not. The individual should load up on gold, but the government should stay the hell away from it because they would absolutely bankrupt us in no time. And then again, if we were an industrious nation, then I would have an opposite feeling of that, you know. If people would stop spending, the prices would fall. Thank you, UE, for supporting the fight and educating us on the Fed. God bless the sovereign citizens. Yes, absolutely. You know, I mean, I love the sovereign citizen, you know, thing. I wish everybody knew about it or understood it. You know, that's probably one of the biggest, like somebody asked me one time what I thought the biggest conspiracy theory was, and that's it. It's not even a conspiracy theory. I mean, it's the reality of the situation is that, you know, us as an individual, as a sovereign, you know, a sovereign person on this earth is not subject to government rule by any means. We're a higher authority than all that stuff. And being able to conduct yourself in that fashion is very difficult, and it's not exactly, I don't know, fun. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's fun for some people, but it's you know, it's a lot of work and it's not cheap, you know. I mean for some people they figured it out, you know, where they can do it, but being a sovereign citizen where you are completely free from government, you know, that's really, if everybody understood that that existed, you know, I don't think we would be having the same, I don't think society would be like this, you know. It would be very different. How about the Fed government borrowing heavily to finance the spending bills? Doesn't that more counteract the restrictive policies by the Fed, meaning the economy is still being stimulated? How about the Fed government borrowing heavily to finance the spending bills? Doesn't that more counteract the restrictive policies by the Fed, meaning the economy is still being stimulated? Well, I mean, I think it's more. I mean, I guess like the idea behind that is that the government spending itself is what's stimulating the economy, as opposed to say the interest rates and the people within it. I mean, I could see where government spending could have that impression that it's like it's stimulating the economy, but I don't necessarily think that that's what's like, you know, driving the economy, the consumer, and all that other stuff. I mean, I think it's a way to inject money into the system. But, you know, as far as like being the actual stimulator of the economy, I think that comes more from the lowering of interest rates or the raising of inflation expectation, right? Because you think about it, like if you raise inflation expectation, think about what you can do to stimulus, right? So even okay, even for me, for an example, I got a loan on my house for at 3.25%, right? But let's say I had an inflation expectation of 8% for the foreseeable future, like from now on. I have a return of what, like, geez, I can't even do the math right now, 4.75%, right? So that's like if you could have a low interest rate while having a high inflation expectation, that increases the monetary stimulus from it, right? Because now all of a sudden people are willing to borrow money right now at 3%, thinking that they are like saving their purchasing power of losing, instead of losing 7% in purchasing power. You see what I'm saying? Spend the money now at 3.25 as opposed to losing it at 7% or 8%, you know, inflation going into the future. So it encourages people to take out and borrow money at low neutral interest rates or at low interest rates. When you, oh God, man, I'm just talking too much. It encourages people to take out loans at low interest rates when they have a high inflation expectation. It encourages that to take place, right? But the exact opposite happens when you have a low inflation expectation, and you got the president even saying it. There's no inflation. The Fed should be printing money. Then people had a low inflation expectation. They're like, there's no inflation. You know, let's fire Jerome Powell. He has no idea what he's doing, right? But those two were teaming up. That was a total team effort. Seems to me sending 124 billion to Ukraine is inflationary. No, what's inflationary is $250 trillion of dollar denominated debt that gets used as dollars around the world. That's inflationary, right? That's money that is out of our control, doesn't even, we don't even know it exists. We don't even know how big that really is, right? So when you think about, there's countries out there who have written debts in dollars that are due in dollars that have nothing to do with the United States or government or banking systems or corporations, nothing, not our citizens or anything. And those contracts get used for dollars. That's inflationary. That's really where, you think about the expansion of money and credit comes from, is something like that. And when the Federal Reserve was asked, how much do you plan on printing? They said, it depends on how much demand there are for our liabilities. Now I think about that. It's just like, there's a huge demand for their liabilities, right? Huge. What's up, cat? Can you hear the cat? All right. To UE viewers, do you think that easy zoning laws to allow building of missing middle house, duplexes, townhouse, courtyards would help the housing crisis? Well, I think that would be one part of it, but I don't know if it's really. I don't know if there's anything that you can really do. I mean, I guess that would probably be the biggest effort that could go into it, is to be able to construct a house easier, whether it's zoning laws or even just permitting, like like having to being able to construct a house cheaply, that, like, without all the forced measures that it takes to even construct. Okay, put it for example, like, I sell this stupid little bracket, right? It's literally a punched out piece of metal. It doesn't even really look like anything. It's like something that most people would look at and just pitch, right? It's $47, right? It's $47 for this one stupid little bracket. And you can think about how big a house is and how many pieces and brackets and everything that goes into it, right? It's like ridiculously expensive. Now, is this bracket necessary? Well, and used brackets back in the 60s, 50s and 60s. I mean, there was some bracketing systems in there, but for the most part, everything was constructed, toe-nailed, and put together. And, like, I live in an area that has 200-year-old houses in it. They're still standing, so it's not like, I mean, sure, they build them a lot better, a lot more efficiency, a lot more, like, say, fire, for fire resistance, kind of fire coating and stuff like that. But still, like, the amount of, like, crap that goes into a house that probably is just completely ridiculous or unneeded or can be done differently is quite extreme. I mean, considering just that $47 bracket alone. Yeah, I got a super chat. Let's go find that. There it is. Hey, thank you, Glenn, for the $2. Evening, Simon. Thanks for all your insight. Well, thank you very much for being here. Thank you, everybody, for hitting that likes button. Thank you so much for that $1.67, the $2 Canadian. I really appreciate that. All the support that you guys give for the channel. It's just really, I always thank you guys, and I can always say it. I can never thank you enough, but I do appreciate all the support. Let's see, where were we at? What's up, mamas? Okay, let's see here. I think I was down here a little bit. All right, I wonder if the expected silver as payment in Planet of the Apes. Everyone hit the like button. Thanks, you mamas. All right. Took my daughter to Panera. Panera the other day was $29 and change. Yeah, right? I mean, what was it? We went up to Wild Waves the other day, and in the middle of the afternoon, we decided to go to a fast food restaurant, and between the four of us, I guess it wasn't too bad. I mean, it was $47 or something like that, but still, I thought, dang, 4 people at a fast food restaurant. All right. Everyone has the same opportunity to go to college. Yeah, you're right. Everybody has the exact same opportunities, right? I mean, whether the way I see it, the day I graduated high school, I stood on the same grounds as everybody else, right? I stood at the exact same spot as everybody else. I had the same opportunity to take my education for what it was. I had, whatever. I mean, I grew up in a different area. I didn't have the same opportunity as somebody who lived in a city or something like that. But I had the same opportunity to do whatever I wanted to with my life, just like everybody else did. And I screwed a lot of it up, right? I mean, a lot of other people went to college and, got a degree and did whatever it is that they, did with it. And whether they used it today or not, I mean, that was the decisions that they made. But I don't, I mean, I don't, the way I see it, it was just like, you went to college, right? You got the degree, you took out the debt, you got to pay the consequences for that debt, right? Now, if you didn't use your degree to go and pay that thing off, man, I don't know what to tell you, right? I mean, I certainly didn't get any kind of return for investment from all the beer and weed I smoked, beer I drank and weed I smoked. There was no return for that, right? And so I don't blame anybody for it. I had to buckle down and pay off all my debts and then, quit doing all those things. Microdose psilocybins. No, I don't know. That whole I mean, I don't knock the psilocybin for medicine. I mean, there's a lot of people who really talk about a lot of the benefits of it and really praise them up real well. My experience with it is much different, and I don't. I'm not saying I have prejudice or preconceived or anything else like that. It's just my experience with mushrooms was not one of this is going to be useful medicine, right? Now microdosing might be a very much different thing, and it totally might be helping somebody out who has some psychological issues or something like that. Maybe my psychological issues meant that I shouldn't have been on mushrooms or something, but anyway, yeah, I'm not a big fan. Yeah. So XRP fam, what up? 5 tacos should be $15 in my world. Give the stream a like. Yes, please do. 161 with 116 likes. Well, that's a bunch of you. Appreciate it. All right. Retirement isn't promised anymore. Was retirement ever a promise? I don't remember anybody ever coming to me and saying, dude, we promise you a retirement, and I was like, I cannot remember. I maybe I'll miss that day or something like that, but I don't remember anybody ever coming to me and promising me anything of such manners ever, right? And as people talking about Social Security, I done wrote that shit off a long time ago, right? I'm like, whether I get it or not, so be it. I mean, I'm not gonna have that stuff hanging over my head, telling politicians saying you're gonna get it, not gonna get it, or whatever. Yeah, whatever. If you want to give it to me in the end, cool. If not, that's fine. I wasn't expecting it anyway. Right? And that's exactly the way I feel about Social Security. I don't mind paying it. I really don't. I really don't mind paying Social Security. I figure it's like the old people tax. You gotta, help them out. There's plenty of people who are on Social Security who wouldn't be able to make it without it. So, it's just I guess that's my part. I don't know how to say it, but, I don't, if I had my choice, I wouldn't do it, right? Seeing more realtor signs lately. Yeah, I was looking in my area, and still it's really tight. There's not a lot of homes for sale. They did come down a little bit, but it's still quite expensive. And I think it's just my area. It's it really is. It's retirement community, and there's not a lot up here for sale. So, all right. What's the next emergency that comes just as we are about to have a recession? Is what I'm looking forward to. Yeah. I don't know what the next emergency is. I had a meeting with my financial advisor today, and he asked why I'm 50% capital preservation right now because this time of year is historically good for markets. Wow, step into my office. Fired. What are your thoughts on the impact of the World Cup 2026 to the housing market? I have no idea. To be honest with you, I could not even fathom. I can't even come up with a thought about that. I don't even have any information to even process the World Cup. That's sorry, I just don't pay attention. Hey Simon, I'm going into my junior year of high school and made it my goal to earn my network and cert before school starts. I've been studying for a long time now, and my test is in 7 days. Any advice? let's see, high school and made it my goal to earn my, what's a network? Okay, man. What's a network plus? I don't, I, maybe I'm dense. I don't know. All right. People with money in money market accounts have to realize the money market accounts are not FDI insured. No, they're absolutely not. But that's something I don't think you really have to stress much about. I believe that the Federal Reserve will step up with monetary policies or tool like lifeboats, like tools within the toolbox that nobody's ever heard of, stuff like the Bank Term Funding Program. I think that there's no part of the financial market that the Federal Reserve will not be willing to step up with a some sort of program in order to keep liquid. So even if it's not FDIC insured, the idea of taking on risk is really not. I mean, there's no need to worry about that. Like risk isn't really an issue anymore. The Federal Reserve has pretty much eliminated risk. I mean, at least as far as banking crisis stuff goes. Because as soon as the banking crisis or anything kind of comes up, they're going to be right there to deal with it. I mean, think about it. Every single scenario that you could ever possibly come up with, the Federal Reserve has thought of it too, right? And when it comes to the great financial crisis and the mortgages and all that other stuff, I think Ben Bernanke was straight up lying through his teeth, right? I mean, it was just all it was. It was credible threats, and he was pouring it on, saying that they didn't see any issues with the subprime or that things were isolated to the subprime or what all that stuff. It was all hoopla, right? Everything was. Anyway, that's why the BRICS nations can go to gold and have no problem. They will have one hell of a time going to gold, and they're not going to do it, right? I mean, they could do it. I shouldn't say they're not going to, but most likely they're not going to do it. And the reason is that they would suffer the same consequences of every nation that has ever been on a gold standard, in that at some point you're going to find that the industriousness of your people have brought in a bunch of gold. You all start falling into luxuries, and then the moment that you start going into luxuries, you start exporting your manufacturing and importing foreign production until everybody falls into poverty. And it's the same thing that happens time and time and time again. You just have to look through history to see it. And if you don't fight wars like the Roman Empire to the point that you just can no longer do it anymore, then you're going to end up having to do something like issue out debt like the United States did. And now there's very few nations in the entire world who can compete with the United States when it comes to their debt issuance, right? I mean, there's two things you have to have in order to be the world reserve currency. You have to be able to issue out a safe and liquid asset like the US Treasuries, and then you have to be able to be willing to do deficit spending, meaning import more than you export so that you can get your dollars out there to the rest of the world. The moment that the BRICS nations go to a gold standard, the most industrious nation will start importing all the gold, and the rest of the nations will be deprived of money. Okay? And that's really what the gold standard is. It's a concentration of money. It forces business cycles, which is a good thing. If we were all prepared for it and understood it and economically, aware of the situation, then it probably wouldn't be as much of a big deal. But people don't do that. Most people will be in the booming times of the business cycle thinking things that will never end, and then never saving for the downturn. And then once the redistribution of wealth from the concentration of money had occurred, there would be so much poverty stricken people afterwards that it would just be very difficult for anybody to be voluntarily go into that system. Instead, they would much rather have this system where you can just blame the government and get a bunch of bailouts from it, or bail the government and get whatever to them to do, whatever they, whatever it is that they do, it's I laugh at some of the things that, people expect out of their politicians. It's just, it's almost ridiculous. How much money do you spend on eating out monthly? Half the time I go out for lunch instead of taking food for my lunch. I say Sunday nights, Sarah will order some food sometimes at Bingo. We ate out quite a bit, just recently because we went up to, Federal Way for the Wild Waves Park. So we ate out a few times then. But honestly, I might, if I was to be real truthful with it, I might eat out twice a week, right? And that's a big maybe. Most of the time I eat at home, like all the time I eat at home. You know. I feel fortunate. CDN, government, taxpayers paid off my education. 50 years old, graduated 2014, been working steady, and CO2 reducing industries since the beginning or since the program. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I have heard of plenty of corporations, even like, crappy corporations that most people wouldn't even want to work for, who will pay for your education, who will, you can go and get business degrees and business management stuff and all whatever. And they will pay for all of it. You do have to kind of be a slave for them for a couple of years, but then you're out of there with a degree and you didn't have to pay for it and you actually earn money while doing it. It's just like I don't understand why more people don't take that route. And it's like it's funny because you see the people who work those jobs never take advantage of them, like ever. Like, the only very few, like one in a handful might actually go and take a college course or something like that and get their company to pay for it. But at least from the ones that I've seen. So maybe that's more of a thing that I'm just not realizing too, because like I don't really work those kind of industries. Uh, um. Not doom and gloom, but seems like there's no negative economic news that can persuade majority of the people hard times coming. Like what news would it take for the markets to fall? I guess momentum or something. I mean, to me, like again, it's all about the meaning that you give it. I mean, if you're looking at the information as if this information is going to totally destroy my life, then that's what it's going to do for you. I mean, you'll actually be making decisions and conditioning yourself to be punished by the outcome of the economy just simply because that's what you were expecting it to do. And that's like that truly happens. Most people don't even realize that by their own thoughts that they destroy themselves. If you look at the information and say, wow, this is pretty heavy, I mean, even if it's like, scary information, and you could say, okay, well, now that I have this information, what meaning am I going to give it? And then how do I use this information to benefit my life? That's really how it has to happen, because if you take it in as like, as fear, right, then what will end up happening is that this fear will put you in this lower vibration in which that it will start attracting all the negative things in life, right? That's one of the reasons why I was really like, thinking about this channel. It was just like, man, as much as like, like I say, I try to look at this for myself and try and give it that kind of meaning as like, it benefits my life. Sometimes I wonder the way I present it, if people are also taking it in that kind of fashion, and then like, what is it doing to their vibration? Because I don't want to lower people's vibration with my information. I want it to be beneficial and help them, and whatever. Okay. Inflation numbers in Canada jumped higher this week, up to 3.3. Not good. Poop Zoomies money market accounts not in the bank or credit are not FDI insured. I boycotted everything unessential that raised prices above what I think it's worth. What money market accounts are not? That's okay. Hey Glenn, thanks for being a member, man. I appreciate that. All right. No inflation if money transfers speed of sound. Actually, I think that wouldn't it be that you could actually have more, and you would have more inflation if money velocity picked up. I mean, you think about it. If you had, you know, all the money sitting in a bank account but not doing anything, then it's not going to really create any kind of inflation. But the moment that it gets out there into the system and starts changing hands quickly, that's really what could start driving inflation up. And also really, what drives inflation, right? Because a lot of people will just say it's the expansion of money and credit, but it's not really just the expansion of money and credit. It actually has to get into the system and be changing hands, right? But really, it's like when you have quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Here you had balance sheet expansion from $850 billion to 4 point, what was it, 4.9 or something, 4.7, I don't know, almost $5 trillion, right? So let's just say $4.5 trillion they got the balance sheet up to. Now, that expansion of the balance sheet, 850 billion to 4.5 trillion, was way more on a percentage basis than we have experienced just recently. Even though the amount of money that the Federal Reserve had printed up during the pandemic was more on, just a number basis, the percentage wise, they only doubled it, right? They doubled the balance sheet, where back in, quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4, they like quadrupled it or more. So the money expansion that happened during 1, 2, 3, and 4, quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4, was far greater of a money expansion than what we experienced here during the pandemic, right? However, the quantitative easing failed to produce the 2% inflation scenario that the Federal Reserve was looking for. In fact, this speech is all about that exact thing, right? It was just like it failed to produce the 2% inflation that the Fed was after. And a lot of people don't really talk about that. They don't explain it or even understand what it is that was taking place during the time that denied the economy from having the inflation scenario that the Federal Reserve was looking for. And the main reason is because most of that money ended up on the bank's balance sheets and needed to be lent into the system, right? And it never really got lent into the system in that fashion. Now, you did see it happen, it went into the market, it went into the housing market, it went into things that you borrow money for, because that's where the easy access to money went. But now when you have inflation to all things, like when all things move up at the same time, that is due to the fact that money is entering all channels at the same time. That's how you get broad-based inflation, right? And in this case, it happened to come at the same time as you had a severing of the supply chain. So it was a double whammy, right? You entered money at all channels, everybody got stimulus checks, right? Or a bunch of people from a cross section of the economy all got a bunch of money, and so they went out and spent this money at the same time that they were denying products to get through the system. Supply and demand imbalance, bang, inflation, right? So inflation had already happened way back in quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 by a lot, right? So the expansion of money and credit had already taken place. What failed to occur was the prices that the Federal Reserve was looking for. And the reason is that you didn't have the money flowing in at all channels in the same fashion, and the production coming from the entire world was plentiful. I don't know how else to say it. It was just like there was plenty of inventory out there. This was all about clearing that out. This is the great, right? This is all about the Great Reset. I love this speech. This thing is so telling. Right? Everybody, I left a link down in the description for everybody to go read it. But this is very telling. Like this is one that everybody should really read. I mean, especially that one about the downward shift in inflation expectation has a second round effect on real interest rates, the economy, and inflation. When policy is constrained by the effective lower bound, the downward shift in inflation expectations raises the real interest rates, further diminishing the degree of monetary stimulus, making the downturn worse and reducing inflation even more. That is exactly what happened in 2019, towards the end of 2019. Right? Policy was constrained by the effective lower bound, the downward shift in inflation expectations, further diminishing of the degree of monetary stimulus, the COVID-induced recession, and all the packages and everything else that came out afterwards. Okay. Do you think letting in millions of illegal immigrants help the housing or cost of living crisis? I don't know. Where are all the workers? Right? People that go to art school can draw everything by a paycheck. Their degrees will make good kindling when they can't pay their heating bill. Stay curious. Thank you for the $2. If the Fed cuts rates, is hyperinflation certain? I don't think, to be honest with you, I don't really believe that hyperinflation can happen so long as you have a world reserve currency in play. I just don't believe it. If the dollar fails to maintain its world reserve currency status and people then begin to get out of the dollar, and that in itself would, okay. So let's think about the scenario that goes down. Let's say, for example, that people are going to get out of the dollar, what that's going to look like, right? So the first thing they're going to need to do, because you're outside of the United States and they're going to send all these dollars back to the United States, this is going to cause a hyperinflation scenario, right? I mean, that's what it is. People, piss on the dollar. We don't like the dollar anymore. Here's your dollars back. Haha, enjoy your hyperinflation, right? That's the story that a lot of people are telling. Okay. Now, when you have $250 trillion worth of dollar denominated debt, this has to go away, right? Because other than that, there's going to be a demand for dollars. If you have this $250 trillion of dollar denominated debt. Okay, but let's say, for example, that gets eliminated. Right? You say take other forms of payment, gold, yuan, you're going to take it off, whatever. You're not going to use the dollar to pay off all this debt. Right? So now you got all these paper dollars that are still outside of the United States. So what are you going to do? You're going to invest into the United States into a dollar denominated asset. You already said piss on the dollar. You don't want it. Right? So you're not going to invest with dollars so that you can get paid in dollars. You don't want dollars. You already just got out of that whole scheme. So now what are you going to do with your dollars? You're not going to spend it with anybody else because nobody else wants the dollars either, right? So now you're going to have to buy American-made stuff. And so what is that going to do to the manufacturing base here in the United States as everybody's trying to get out of the dollar, figure out what it is that they're going to do with these dollars that they have no idea on what to do with them because there is no place to invest it, that you're not going to get it paid anything but dollars. So you start buying American-made products instead, and that starts boosting the American manufacturing base, right? So maybe that's what ends up happening from it, right? Or, maybe it is hyperinflation. Everybody just takes their dollars and sends them back to the United States and doesn't ask for anything for them. Just here, you can have them back. Like, I mean, would that be the case? I don't know. Like, I mean, I try to wonder. And then I wonder how many dollars are actually out there for that kind of purpose. Once you start eliminating the debt out there, the demand for dollars and the strength of the dollar, would it even allow people to even be so concerned about giving up their dollars? Because that would start strengthening the dollars. You think about it, if you start eliminating dollar denominated debt, that would start strengthening the dollar in such a way that people are just not able to even wrap their heads around. I can't even think about how much that can strengthen the dollar, right? I mean, Brent Johnson and Jeff Snyder, they got theories based completely on that alone, right? So, when you think about how strong the dollar can get if you were to eliminate all the dollar denominated debt that's out there, on the way to that, I mean, like as far as eliminating that debt, who knows how strong the dollar could be? People will be looking at it like it was the next best thing to gold. I mean, that's a serious situation that can take place from it, and one that not a lot of people comprehend. Like, I mean, I think about it because I also think about what a hyperinflation scenario would look like as well. I mean, if you're convinced that it's going to be hyperinflation that's going to happen, then you can find all the evidence of that coming. Like, you can sit around and like just pinpoint and locate and just talk about and listen to theories about how it's going to be a hyperinflation scenario that's going to totally ruin the United States. I mean, it's full of it out there. I mean, and there's plenty of evidence of it. And especially if you hit it with some emotion to it, then you'll totally believe it and be convinced by it as well. I'm not convinced by that. I'm not convinced that it's not going to happen either, right? But I try to be aware of what it is that I would see, or like I would think I would be seeing if a hyperinflation scenario was to be taking place. I would think some of these things would be occurring, right? Very much like foreclosure rates on homes. And I don't see foreclosure rates on homes going up until I see unemployment start to rise. I would think that unemployment rising would be preliminary to foreclosures. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I think. And so I don't look for the foreclosures or the possibilities of foreclosures or anything like that. I'm looking at those layoffs saying, okay, how intense is that going to get? Because eventually that should start bleeding into unemployment, right? So yeah, are we there yet? I haven't seen it. All right, man, 157 and 144 likes. That is so awesome. We got almost 100% like going on right now. All right. I actually see what you mean. If you have funds over 250K limit, it goes into an overflow fund that is not insured. Work to death always was a promise. Retirement started out as a responsibility. I think it still is, right? I mean, isn't it still a responsibility? I mean, I know that I worry about it. Like, I mean, I don't like, sit up there stressing at night about it, but I mean, I take it on as one of my, like, elevated concerns that is out there, especially being 40 years old and had nothing to my name. That's a pretty rough place to start, your retirement from, and hoping that you'll ever have one. My dad always told me that any retirement I would have would be up to me. Social Security has been dying my whole life. Yeah, my dad did not tell me that. My dad told me that, well, my dad did things very different. It's amazing on how I turned out considering what my dad did. My dad spent 20 years in the Coast Guard, then he spent 20 years working the state parks. So he like did state park ranger. So yeah, he did 20 years military, 20 years state park. He has a government retirement, state retirement, social security. He's pretty well set, right? I mean, so long as those, retirements keep coming in, he really did it up smart. Did it he didn't think about it. He just, hey, he did 20 years in the Coast Guard. He just did what they told him to do. Did 20 years in the Park Service. Did what they told him to do. Hey, retired. Easy, right? Nothing to it. I don't know why it's a problem. He made it look easy too. Here I am out struggling, trying. I'm telling him, Dad, oh, guess how much I'm making on this job site. He's like, wow, I never made that much. I'm like, yeah, pretty cool. He tells me, yeah, shit happens. And now I'm like, oh, yeah, and he was right. Because it wasn't but a few years later, I wasn't making any money. All right. Was that a baby crying in the background? Oh no, it was the cat. I don't know where you went though. All right. Matt Bittner, retirement for Americans is going to be a luxury because more people are going to be impoverished. Yeah. To be honest with you, I'm really hoping that YouTube still exists by the time I'm retired and I can just do daily YouTubes for my retirement and hope that is like what's going to carry me through. So that would be a really nice thing to maybe I'll think that into my future. All right. All right. Fed raises rates to give themselves ammo to fight the next crisis. All right. Simon, do you think the USA needs more tradespeople like chippies, sparkies, and plumbers? I like it. Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're going to have, any kind of construction or manufacturing taking place in the United States, then you have to have those type of people, those skilled laborers. I mean, if you don't have it, then what do you have? You have expensive labor. You have expensive, input costs going into this stuff. And if you can't do it yourself, then you end up having to bring in foreign producers of it. I mean, just think about like the video I did earlier today, right? Which I thought it was a pretty good video, but I got a lot of backlash for it. Oops. But I think about like the chip manufacturing, right? This is something that is not like I have yet to see anything that is like making this a good idea. The only thing that makes it a good idea is for like, you know, for defense purposes, right? So that we can have our own supply of chips that isn't corrupted by China or something like that. I could see that as like a decent reason, right? But everything else is telling me that this is terrible. It's a terrible economic decision because there's no way that this thing is going to be profitable, and there's no way that we're going to do it as good as people who are already doing it. Excuse me. And so you can see it by the plant that they're trying to set up in Arizona, where they're having a hell of a time just even putting this thing together because they don't have the skills here in the United States to build these things because we don't really do them, right? So that's why they want to bring in foreign producers, right? You know, foreign workers to come in and say, hey, assemble this factory because, well, we can't, you know? And so, and of course, there might be a lot of excuses and reasons for that and it's whatever, but, you know, that's what the news article was talking about. And I thought to myself, yeah, this is, you know, probably a pretty reasonable thing that, you know, to be expected considering that we're really more of a service industry and not necessarily a manufacturing industry. All right, oops, I guess I should put these back on. All right. Do you think there'll be a Black Swan event soon, like World War? Oh, I don't know. Probably. There's always a Black Swan event of some sort or another, but, you know, I mean, so to say that there wouldn't be, I mean, nah, I mean, there's going to be something at some point, right? All right, I'm saying that's the choice from AI, not you literally UE. Michael Burry shorting the market 1.6 billion. Wow. Um, hey, I'm 23 doing work on certs now. That's a good one. Thanks, John. All right. In response to my other comment, the Comp TIA Network Plus is an IT certification. Yeah, I'm sorry, man. I wish I had more input to give you on that, but I'm not really that savvy on that. So, but here's the thing: if it, no matter what it is, if it's something that you feel inside you that you like to do it, like, I mean, if it's a passion of yours, like, I mean, I don't know if IT thing is like a passion really, but I mean, it could be. I've seen my buddy who's a computer geek. I mean, he loved it. He would talk about computer programs and all kinds of like stuff that was way over my head, and I would try to listen, and be, but it was something that he was into. He made a job out of it, and this was a guy that I worked with at the lumber yard. And so he just kept, screwing around saying, I want to make money, working on computers. And sure enough, he figured it out. He became an IT guy and he was good at it too. So when it comes to like anything in your life, if you're writing, if you're, even if you're carving wood, if you're, whatever it is you're doing, if it's something that you feel that this is like really in you, this is like the art that is just needs to come out, follow that, right? Follow that in the most that you can, because following your passion is where the universe wants you to be. It wants you to be in abundance, following your passion, doing what it is that you want to do. So it's like I can't really think like I like building stuff, I really enjoyed, doing the framing thing, but I don't really want to be a home builder. Like I don't want that, like I just don't have like a passion to be a home builder. Now, the guy Russ that I know who's a home builder who pays for everything in cash, he does have a passion for it, and you can hear it in him. You can, when he talks about it, he really enjoys everything about the whole process of putting these houses together and selling them, or doing what it is, or it is he's doing whatever it is he's doing with them. But still, it's really within them, and that's, I think that's important for everybody out there to find within themselves. It's just like, whether it's a good idea for somebody to get into an IT job or something like that. I, you know, I don't know. I mean, it's just like that's up to you. But if it's something that you really enjoy and it's something that you feel that that's what you want to do with your life every single day, then I say absolutely you do that. All right. Easy 60 to 80K where I live. Well, that's pretty good. Good to be back. Been missing the live streams. Roll right on, PM Galleria. I love your stuff, man. I got your painting right inside the house there. Sits next to my desk. PM Galleria. That is, he does artwork, and like the art piece of artwork he sent me was like kind of like the image of of like the Toyota with the rear view mirror and the dice and all that, and he put silver, like an ounce of silver, like shaved silver, into the painting itself. So the painting itself has an ounce of silver on it, which I think is just quite unique. So very cool stuff. Thanks for being here, brother. All right. How easy is it to get an IT job with Capita Cert? Oh. I was watching the PBD podcast the other day, and he was talking about how hard it is for millennials with prices and pay. He brought up he brought up how older people are robbing millennials for Social Security. I don't know. I yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't know. It's just the system that has been set up here. I mean, we chose to work in it or whatever. I don't know. I mean, you can go work on your own and not pay any taxes. Well, I mean, you have to pay some taxes for it, but you can avoid a lot of that stuff just by working for yourself. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, I look at Social Security as just like I don't pay. If I could have my choice, I wouldn't pay any taxes at all, right? I mean, that's the choice that I would make. But Social Security is like one of the least like one of the few that I really don't have a problem as much with. Is like my least problem, as far as the taxes that get taken out of my check, and simply just because I know that it's going to benefit a bunch of old people who probably wouldn't do well without it. So, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with it, but whatever. All right, microdose of fat bowl. Hey Simon, time to show. Wanted to see what your thoughts were on high yielding saving accounts being rates are currently 4 to 6 for a return right now. Would you recommend putting 6 months, years worth of cash away? Um, I don't know. I guess it depends on how much money that is and how much is going to be worth it to you, to take on that, that timeline risk, right? Because, really it's probably a pretty safe place that you can end up putting that. You don't have to really necessarily worry about not getting your money back. So if you're not worried about not getting your money back, then it would be okay to put it there and get the return off of it. Now, is that return worth the time that you are going to tie that up? See, like, are you anticipating that there might be some point here in the next 6 months or even year, depending on how long you plan on tying it up, in which that you're going to say, man, I wish I had that money so that I could take advantage of this much better opportunity that is happening? And then is that like a concern? And if it's not, like how much money are you going to get from actually holding it onto in there for a year? You think about it, it's like you got $100,000, you're going to get a 4% return over a year. It's 4 grand. That's a lot of money, right? I mean, 4 grand is a lot of money for not, for just simply just placing your 100 grand into a particular account. But then, is 4 grand really worth it to you to tie that money up when you might have had an opportunity to buy something with a $40,000 discount? You know what I'm saying? It's just like how much was that $4,000 really worth it to you? And then again, like depending on what kind of account you have it in, you might be able to quickly liquidate it and say take a small loss so that you could take advantage of that 40 grand opportunity or something. So, right? I don't know. Depends on what kind of position you're in and what your risk tolerance is and what it is that you see for the future on it. I personally am doing cash. Like I mean, right now it's just like even just trying to save cash is a little difficult, but just holding on to as much cash, waiting for the new year, because I think that's when the liquidity issues are going to start arising and you're going to find buying opportunities. I mean, buying buying into the stock market at dollar cost averaging or whatever it is that you have, I don't see anything wrong with that. Like a lot of people are like, man, the stock market's going to crash or whatever. Especially if you're young and you got a long road ahead of you, dollar cost average into anything that you feel can be a compounding interest account. Like if you can roll it over into right back into the same account and gain an interest rate off of it, and you are young, do that. Do that and do it religiously for your life, and you will be so happy that you did, right? And just be very vigilant on where it's at. Like just know where your money is and whether or not it's a good place for it to be. And yeah, you do stuff like that, and you don't even really have to think about it. It's like $50 a month, $100 a month, and by the end of it, you'll be doing quite well. That's how I see it. All right. Fidelity is a brokerage and not a bank or a credit union. All of our economic systems are tied together, so we tend to suffer together. Well, again, I think that's all about the position in which that you have taken and the meaning that you have given it. There are some people who are absolutely killing it right now and other people who are failing miserably. So not everybody experiences the same economy, right? I mean, we all live in the same economy, but the way you see it and the way you have positioned yourself is definitely not the same for everybody, right? Most likely in NATO. Okay. More and more like, okay. I just get tired of such major swings in the economy, so much volatility. China and Russia have just been sitting back, watching us fight, learning our tendencies, seeing how we react to things. Simon, cute move with the dice inside. Yeah, thanks. The family went and got them for me. Simon, that's entirely way too much money to spend on food. Yeah. No, I mean, like, my wife is probably one of the best food shoppers I have ever seen. Like, I ask her all the time, it's just like, how's the food inflation out there? She always, some stuff, whatever. She's just like really good at it. She buys like stuff in bulk. She, looks for discounts. She's like, she sees things on sale. She is a very good shopper. And when she finds those opportunities, she takes advantage of it. And since she ain't afraid to buy, a lot, so she's willing to take it all on. And she does quite well with it. Yeah. So like like food bill is not one that I necessarily stress too much about because of that. Like, I could see like if you're, for like most people and like even for everybody, it's just like, it's a major concern. And when you keep like a stack when you have like as much food in the pantry as like with rice and beans and oats and all the stuff, really you don't need that much. You get some protein, you get some fresh vegetables, and you have everything else you already need, and you buy it in bulk. It's not that expensive. But if you lived in like a tight apartment or something like that and you couldn't really load up on bulk and canning really isn't necessarily an option, I could see where food could be a difficult thing. Yeah. All right, don't forget your land is not yours. No, this land, build lands. Okay, gates, oils. Okay. Yes, seeing more for sale signs. Okay, maybe true. There are cycles, and gold back would solve issues going on now. I think governments don't care what happens years later as they believe they can solve issues later. Um, No, I think they do know. I think they know. And I think that's, part of the reasons why we aren't sitting on a gold standard as today. We're not moving back to a gold standard, but we're actually going to be moving into central bank digital currencies instead. I think the threat of a gold standard is a far off, concept. I mean, I'm not saying that it won't exist, but I'm just saying it ain't going to be like some kind of real viable currency working as a world reserve currency or something like that. And I guess I shouldn't say that it won't be that way. What I guess I'm getting at is that the condition of the economic environment in which we experience it today would certainly not be the same. And that, we would find the boom and bust cycles to be very, uh, very difficult to work through. It would be very cumbersome economy. You know, that's how I see it happening. But, I mean, it could. I shouldn't say it won't. All right. Shiva, the god of destruction. Eggs, 2 18 packs for $3. $2 Roma pizzas, five and for 10. Like pre-beer flu. Food going way back down, at least at Piggly Wiggly, Middle America Flyer. Yeah, and I mean, I saw it. I picked, my wife and we picked up a bunch of pork for like 97 cents a pound, but we knew that pork prices were going to be coming down. We saw that, and I would be a little bit concerned for those who are actually, pork eaters and enjoy that, because I feel that here, coming in the future, we're going to have some issues with pork supply, considering a lot of the pork manufacturers have been shutting down. And that's a report that we did a couple of months ago. So, here it is, the cheap pork prices due to the oversupplying of pork, and we're going to find those pork producers going out of business, and then the shortage of pork kicking in again. Bullwhip effect. Inflation is here to stay. I mean, not in lumber, not in MDF, not in, that's all coming down. Yeah, cheap weed is good too. Yeah, well, like, how about that? Weed never experienced an inflationary scenario. How come? I mean, if all things went up together, how come marijuana prices failed to increase? Right? Now, I mean, I don't know how many people know about weed prices, but here in Oregon, weed's everywhere. It's legal. It's like, there's more dispensaries than there is, just about any place else, the practically bars. I don't know. There's like 5 or 6 dispensaries in Astoria, right? And I see the signs outside the front doors, $30 ounces. I remember when I was a kid, buying weed, it was $320 ounces. It was a hell of a lot more expensive and than it is today. And from what I understand, it practically pours out on the ground, right? There's so much weed here in Oregon, they don't even know what to do with it all. Like, it's, there's no money. There's no money in the process of weed unless you are like making another product out of it. But the actual growing and selling of cannabis is a terrible business. And I knew that from a long time ago. See, I mean, that was one of the earlier videos that I had put out on this channel was somebody was asking me to talk about cannabis stocks, and I had that exact same opinion back then too, is that I wasn't a fan of cannabis stocks, and for that very reason. And really the main reason it comes down to is because you don't have to have any kind of real skill to grow weed, right? Now you have to have a good understanding and skill to grow a lot of really good weed, but you don't really have to have any kind of skill to grow weed. It's just a plant, it's a weed. It'll just grow on its own. All you have to do is just put it in the ground and give it some water. So the process of growing weed is very simple. There's nothing to it. The process of like brewing good beer, making good wine, this is like an actual skill that you have to know what you are doing and have done it, right? No matter how hard you try to follow somebody's recipe, you will never be able to brew beer as good as a good brewer can, right? And that's just, that's what it comes down to. So weed has no value. It grows on its own and it doesn't take any skill. So it's like, there's that, yeah. I mean, other than the fact that it's illegal, that's the only thing that gives it any kind of value, right? You take something that somebody wants, you make it illegal, and you'll give it value anytime. Drugs, alcohol, guns, sex, doesn't matter what it is, Take something somebody wants, make it illegal, and you'll give it a ton of value. And I think about that with like Bitcoin. It's just like if they were to make like outlaw Bitcoin, make it completely illegal, I think that would be probably one of the best things that would ever happen to Bitcoin. And I just use the examples of sex, drugs, and alcohol, and guns and firearms. All right. Direct payments messed us up. Eggs were $6, $6 or $7 a dozen. So everybody in Southern California, Montana town built chickens, and then a new dollar store here sells them for $2 recently. Yeah, it's exactly in that. Again, this is all part of not only the blow-up effect, but it also leads in with the Cantillon effect and everything else. When you have the situation with whether it was lumber or eggs or trucking, right? It doesn't pick anything out there. It doesn't matter what it is. And all of a sudden there's a shortage of it and the price runs way up. The investment that starts moving into that starts really ramping up. People are wanting to take advantage of those high prices. They look at $7 a dozen for eggs and they think, man, if I had 400 chickens, you know how much money I would make off all these eggs? And then by the time everybody gets their 400 chickens and they start producing eggs, they realize there's a hell of an oversupply of eggs because everybody had the same idea of getting chickens so that they could take advantage of $7 a dozen eggs, right? Same thing with trucking, right? Trucking all of a sudden shot through the roof. They were begging for truck drivers, start you off with a $30,000, cash sign-on bonus to drive trucks around because they couldn't find anybody to drive a truck. So they started hiring and building up equipment and, expanding the trucking operations. And now all of a sudden you have yellow trucking going out of business, right? Same thing. It's just like this happens over and over again. So anytime you ever have like this overindulgence into something that causes the prices to go way up, or you have a shortage of something that causes it to happen, it's very temporary. What ends up happening is the investment that goes into it oversupplies, and then the investment is a malinvestment and they start to fail. So. Cheap weed's bad. The interest rate on cash in a money market account is earning as much as the rate of inflation now. That means that your money is not lost to inflation every year. Why risk your biscuits? It's because it's an inflation expectation that is really causing the interest rates to rise, right? If they had a lower inflation expectation, it would lower the inflation expectation and raise the real interest rates. There you go. So if you have a high inflation expectation and your money market account is also creating a high interest rate, then it's really ultimately a zero. You should keep your money there, and then everybody should have a low inflation expectation, and then the real interest rates would go up, and you would make more money. Just everybody believe there's no inflation, and then it'll be fine. All right, good weed isn't cheap. Cheap weed isn't good. Yeah, I can believe that. Thought about Bitcoin. What time is it? It's one. We're an hour and 30 into this. All right. Cantillon effect. First QE, money went to the banks and so investments. Pandemic, money went to stimmy to normal folks who increased regular stuff. So, like, really, the Cantillon effect, I mean, when you think about it, is really like, when you think about it from the silver miner, who is what Cantillon was suggesting, being first access to the money, they spend their money on whatever it is that they enjoy in their life, right? They start hiring carpenters, tailors, you know, the butcher, whatever, you know, this is where all the money starts going in. Those people get access to that money, and then they start enjoying the the increase of you know, abundance of money that they are and you know, getting as well. So this eventually starts moving down. The people at the end of the line are the workers, right? The people who have last access to this money. But by the time they have access to it, it's already too late. Right? So even by stimulating the economy, by injecting the money into the very bottom, it's really just a shot in the arm. It's not anything that's really lasting. Right? Just like the silver mine running out, as soon as the stimulus is gone, it's over. It's like, you know, this isn't something that can be carried on or like naturally reproduced within itself, like an economy that's working on its own or something. You know, it would take ever increasing amounts of stimulus. How is this information supposed to shrink my beer belly? Well, you I don't know. I guess you take on the idea that you want to do something different with your life, and a lot of times the consumption of alcohol will actually lower your vibration down, preventing you from being able to follow your passions and achieve the higher goals in life that you were really intended to do. So maybe follow your passions to get rid of your beer belly, right? You know, and by doing that, you need to raise your vibration, which means that you need to quit drinking beer. Yeah. I mean, you don't need to. I mean, do whatever you want. I don't care. But, you know, if you asked, you know. All right. Just as we were going to have a big time deflationary recession, long and lagging, more like lie and gaslighting. Midtown smells like it got cured inside a fish. Huh. Thanks for doing these, Yui. Yeah, you bet. Well, thanks you all for being here. I mean, it's really, you know, I could be out here just babbling to myself and nobody listening, but you guys are here, you're hanging out. We've been out here for an hour and a half. We got 178 likes, 179 likes, which is more than I have viewers going right now. So, you know, this is really more about, you know, the audience, the viewers. I mean, that's really what this is all about, because without you here, this channel wouldn't be anything, you know. So. Chat GPT company is going bankrupt. Yeah, I messed around with that chat thing, and it was kind of boring. I mean, I tried to get it to identify me, to, you know, to say who I was, what it is that I was all about and stuff, and like it came up with some information, but not nearly as much as I would like it to be, you know. Like, I was like, do a report on who the uneducated economist is, and like it talked about, like, I don't know, it talked about stuff that I don't talk about. It's simple to see. Attach to the land and detach yourself from the reality. Get your nut before the stack gets theirs. Easy fix. We're entering some end times with the economy. It seems I have lived very minimally. All my friends are going broke. Yeah. Eat meat, go carnivore, and you can drink all the barrier you want, period. All right. When is the recession going to happen? People have been talking about it for years, yet nothing really happened. Well, I think the major problem was that we experienced the recession during the pandemic, which should have been a hell of a lot worse than what it was because of the unusual and exigent circumstances. The government, in the conjunction with the Federal Reserve and the Treasury and all that, went into massive stimulus programs, which pretty much covered up the entire recession. And then not only that, but it also pre-bailed out the double dip recession. So if we experienced a recession during the pandemic and we're coming up on another one just right after that, that's kind of like a double dip recession, like one just a few years apart from each other, in the sense that normally these things are spaced out 7 to 12 years or something, right? But this next recession, the one that everybody keeps talking about due to the inverted yield curve and all that other stuff, I don't think it's necessarily going to quite hit us in the same fashion that most people would expect a recession to hit us in, right? Like, what is the worst part of a recession? You lose your job and the corporations get bailed out. Well, what if we're sitting in a situation in which that they allow a bunch of corporations to fail and the people don't really lose their job? The laid off ones just go to work at the service industry where there's plenty of room for employment right now. And we never really quite experienced the pain of a recession. Did we? Do you experience a recession? You know? And so I'm kind of wondering if that's not going to be the case now. All right, get sixth grade street price for Yammer bottom shelf. Okay. I'm glad I just kept on top of investments and maintaining my studio. Yeah. It's a great time to own the dollars. $1 equals 145 yen, $1 102 ruble, $1 136 baht, bahat. How do you say that? Anyhow, strong dollar, right? Strong dollar. Every time people say that it's like worthless and done for, it's not. Like it's still like doing better than it has been for years. Like it's a strong dollar. It's a strong dollar across the world. Even nations that talk about using, yuan for trade are still in high demand for dollars. Places like Sri Lanka and Argentina and even where did I just recently? Turkey. Turkey sold a bunch of dollar bonds to the United Arab Emirates. Right? I mean, where's the de-dollarization story when that comes out and nobody talks about it? It's just like I know de-dollarization is a game that is being played. It's a psyops game. It's a mainstream media propaganda something happening there, and I haven't quite narrowed it down to what it is. I mean, I have a suspicion that they're trying to, get people out of the dollar, which only strengthens the dollar when they do it, which is very something like a lot of people don't think about. And when that happens in turn, it actually starts forcing a lot of manufacturing back to the United States as people try to unwind their dollars back here. Now, whether or not that's the actual game or plan or whatever, it's one of the scenarios that I do think about. But this is like I don't know how to put it. It's like it seems so obvious to me that I'm surprised more people aren't talking about it. So like as far as this whole BRICS nation taking over, a dollar losing its world reserve currency, all that stuff. It's like, what I have understood or what I understand about the dollar and how it functions as a world reserve currency, I could see where it could lose its status. Totally. What I don't see is its replacement. That's my problem with like people saying it's going to lose its status. It was like, okay, how? I mean, if you don't have anything that could possibly replace it, then there's no way it can lose it, right? There will come a time when it'll happen and it will present itself and it'll be like, okay, there it is. That's it. That'll do it. So until then, all the stories that I read, I'm reading this stuff and I'm like, how can these people put this much like belief into this? You know? Just because I guess, it's because of the evidence that is shown to them and the belief that they have taken from it with the emotional connection that goes to it, right? That's really what it comes down to. Because once you have taken that on and you see the dollar as failure, you will see everything as a failure of the dollar. Like that's the way it'll end up being towards you, right? But if you look at it, it was just like the dollar has actually sat as less of a reserve currency in the past than it has today. Like, there was less nations using it as a world reserve currency than there is today, right? So it still has a long ways to go before even falling below where it was. I wouldn't say a long ways, some ways to go. Okay? You look at some of the things that are out there that says, how bad is the position for the dollar itself? All this talk, all the rumors, all the stuff, yeah, it's all scary things, but at the end of the day, there's really nothing else out there that can do what the dollar does, right? And then when the replacement does present itself, it'd probably be pretty obvious. It won't be like, hey, this imaginary bricks gold currency that doesn't even exist. It won't go down like that. It'll be like a legitimate currency that people will be talking about, or be using or something. Not some hypothetical possibility of something that's going to be coming into the future. All right. I'll take the dollar. I'll be like Fight Club. All right, gents, I went to Roto and my unit is set to launch. Crash or not, will stabilize and stacky. His name was Robert Paulson. Deflationary money worldwide. They blow up the place that holds the debt records in the end. I'm sure it does, bro. Okay. Can't we just go back to Wamp Pump? I don't know what that is. Keep cool, Simon. Way too hot in Oregon this week. That was for sure, man. Litecoin leader. I love the name. I love Litecoin. Yeah, it certainly was hot. It was like, it got up to about 100 degrees in Astoria yesterday. It was definitely in the 90s. And, man, we're just not used to that kind of heat. And it's kind of interesting. Like, I can handle it pretty well. It's pretty miserable, but yeah, most people, it's just like once it gets up to that temperature, they're done. Like they cannot, they can't function very well, which makes me wonder. It's just like, man, what kind of conditioning do you have to be in order to live that way all the time? Like some places in Arizona or whatever, where it's just like all the time that hot. Okay. You buy American-made stuff if we make stuff. Otherwise, you buy America like farmland or vacation land. Yeah, but then what does that do for you? Like, I mean, I can understand if you were buying it for maybe the production of it or something like that, but if you were buying it for the investment purposes of it, then you're buying into dollar denominated investments, which is kind of what you are not trying to do, right? So, I mean, but I guess I could see it happening. I mean, some of the savvy ones probably, just like, get into the dollar denominated investments. That would be something. We are building 7. All I see are addicts and hustlers, people looking for their next fix or hit, gamblers and more ladies of the night. The money printer can't be bankrupt. Maybe in Venezuela, hyperinflation. The money printer is absolutely bankrupt. I'm getting yacht. There's another conspiracy coming, absolutely. All right, guys. Well, how long have we been out here? An hour and 45 minutes. Let me cruise down to the bottom here because I know there's a lot of comments. Oh, my goodness. Look at all these comments. Okay. Hey, Lord Humongous is up in here. They are trying to blame the Maui fire on climate change and colonialism. Yeah. Figures they would. History Channel was fun to watch in the days of old. Never marry a woman named Karen. Alright, I haven't seen a decent TV since 90s History Channel. Right on. Well, it was a lot of fun hanging out with you guys. I am going to probably go chill with the family if they haven't already gone to bed. I just realized how late it's really getting out here. But it was a lot of fun breaking this down tonight. This speech is something that I have brought up so many times. I think it is very telling of the situation that we have come into. I mean, he even talks about the average inflation rate in here being one of the ways to deal with the economy. It's very telling, and it makes you really think about like where it is that the neutral interest rate as opposed to where the Fed funds rate are, and the inflation expectation that people have, and how that actually affects the real interest rates. You know, when that inflation expectation rises, it lowers the real interest rate, and when the inflation expectation falls, it raises the real interest rate. Something very interesting to, you know, to try and wrap your head around, and what kind of impacts that has across the broad economy. All right, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Uneducated Economist t-shirt for your moderators. Oh yeah, I should probably do that for you guys, huh? Well, yeah, you're right. That is good advertising, and the moderators could certainly deserve something like that for being such a vigilant people on the comments. You know, making sure we get rid of all those spammers and hate comments and whatever happens to pop up. All right. But thank you guys for being here. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for the thumbs up. Thank you all for being part of this experience with me, and for being part of the Uneducated Economist. You guys let me know. I'm sending you a salmon, Simon. Awesome. I'm looking forward to that, dude. I'll do a video of that just itself. All right. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.